it's week 4. We finished the houses. Now we're doing the landscaping and the interior with the floor and in the fireplace. Stick around. I'll show you how to finish this up. Thanks for coming to Campaign Terrain. I'm your host, Cross, and I'll see you in just a second. So we're building a yard that'll have grass and bushes and things like that. If you're in England or somewhere similar, you're going to be calling this the garden, and there'll be a little bit of a rear. Sometimes you can put a fence on here if you want. There doesn't have to be. This one's, I'm not going to put a fence on the one I'm building for the video. And here's what it's going to look like essentially. You've got the house, you've got a front and rear stoop in front of the door. This one's a little crooked and wonky, but this is my prototype. There's also, when you lift it, a fireplace that matches to the chimney and a floor. Now I'm going to be doing this wood floor, but you can use any texture you want. You can put stones, you can make it just a solid floor, you can use real wood like I've done, you could put a faux wood texture into it, whichever. So we're going to have a fireplace, a little nicer than this one. This one's a prototype. And we're going to have some front stoop, rear stoop, and a floor on this foundation of a small little homestead. And the house will nestle down on top of it, and you can have, these out on your table. You can have 10 or 20 of these, and if anybody happens to say, I'm going into that house, it is playable. You just lift it up, and there's the interior, and you can play from there. So that's it. Let's jump right into it. I'm going to be talking about the ground first. I'll be right back. For the ground, I'm using an 8.5 inch by 8.5 inch square. The reason I'm doing that is because I have other platforms that are 9 inches by 9 inches, and the 8.5 but will fit on that with a 1/4 inch to spare all the way around. So you can make it out of the regular XPS foam. This is the blue foam, but there's also the pink foam. You can make it out of EPS, which is your regular, what most people call styrofoam. It's not actually styrofoam, but it is styrene, and that's the one with the little bead texture in it. You can see here on the side. You can make it with foam core, either peeled or not peeled. That's up to you. There's different ways to do different ones. If I was doing it, I would peel it, but you don't have to. But it's thinner, so it's a little bit brittle once you take the paper off, or not brittle, but flexible once you take the paper off. So I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to go with one of these thicker ones, and I'm going to slope them off. You could use cardboard, you could use MDF, you could use Luan, which is the 1/4 inch plywood, anything like that. So we're going to be working with the 8.5 inch square of the blue foam. At first I was attempting to put the house dead center, and just to make them all equal, and so you could basically have a yard after yard after yard, or garden after garden after garden, and just have a straight line of the houses. But I decided two things. One, if you see right here where I've sloped off, you end up having to slope near the edge. And so putting it here, once you put the rear stoop and the front stoop on, it's going to be difficult to have room. Also, if you don't leave a little bit of a closer margin where the house has more room to be back from it than this front angle, the one where the miniatures need to be able to stand on to climb up into the yard, it gets a little too close to the house for comfort. So what I've opted to do instead is offset the house a bit. For aesthetic purposes, I set it at an angle, and I've also decided to move it back a bit just to make that front edge easier. So when you shave the edge off here, the knee's at a steeper angle, so it's a closer cut. Then we've got plenty of room for the front and rear stoops. Let me show you what that's going to look like. Now this one's already been painted because I'm in the process of building, as I've told you before, like 20 of these. So you look, the angle here at the front of the yard is sloped off gradually, but the angle on the other 3 sides is much more steep. It's much more pronounced. And as you can see, I've left the square where the house is going to be. One, that tells me where it's at, so I don't have to worry about having painted over my marks. And also, it will allow better adhesion for the glue once it comes time to glue the floor down. So for now, we're putting the houses at a slight angle, a little bit close to the back, and shaving off the front. In just a sec, I'll show you how to shave all those edges. Left room for the house, marked out where it's going to be. This shows side of the chimney, front of the stoop roughly, rear stoop roughly. Okay, now there's two ways to do this. I have a somewhat janky looking but perfectly functional homemade hot wire cutter, and there's also the regular old knife. Now this will work, and it'll work on either the EPS or the XPS foam. It'll also work on the foam board, cardboard obviously, but it gets dull really quick, and if you're cutting the EPS, it's going to make a lot of those little beads and pills come out. You have to be really careful with it. Also, it's harder to hold the knife at the correct angle all the way across, so I do not mess with the knife. I use the hot wire cutter, but if you don't have one, knife will work. Now, if you're wondering about the cost of the hot wire cutters, mine cost $3. I had the button laying around, the wires off an old phone, wood sticks I had laying here, foam I had laying here. The wire came out of a busted hairdryer. So, not too much to that. So, I've marked these with pencil. I'm going to show you. I want the front to roughly be there, and the sides to just barely take any off. And those are all going to be at those angles. So that's the top of the cut. The bottom of the cut is still just going to be as close as I can, staying along this straight line here. So let me show you this as I go and do this. Hopefully you can see that. Now, as you can see, we're just going from the side, and I've got the button on so it gets hot that quick. As I do it, I'm going to be cutting here. On this side, I'm going to be trying to follow this front line as well as possible. On this top, I'm just sort of going along it. Now I will be intentionally moving the wire back and forth like this, because I don't want it to be a nice smooth cut. I want it to have a little bit of a wiggle into it, like this, so that it will look better once it's been flocked and has grass and such on it. So, takes just a little second for this to heat up, and then make sure we're in the camera there. And that's it. Okay, now I didn't quite get that shallow enough for a figurine to stand on it, so I'm going to do one more time, and this time I'm just going to take off the top of that ridge there. Alright, that's it. Got a little bit of a wiggle to it. It's not perfectly smooth. Now, every time you cut with that wire, it's going to leave a bit of a ridge. You can just keep trying to take that off further and further and further. Oops, get the paint on my hand. It'll try taking that back further and further and further. Or you can take a sanding stick, or just sandpaper, or a sanding block, if I can find mine. Just a sand block or sanding stick, and just knock down all of those ridges. Now I'm going to finish up the 4 sides of this, the other 3 sides of this, get the ridges knocked off, and I'll be right back. That's sheared off like I said. Took a sanding stick to it afterwards. That one's about ready to go. Now, again, we're going to paint this all with my regular brown base coat, the one I call the Boom, but the brown version, and just let it dry, and then we'll work on the interior of the house while that's drying. So you already saw that I've got some that have been painted. So it's going to come out looking like this. Make sure to leave the space for the house. We want to paint just inside the lines of the house. That way there's no like blue showing through the side of the grass. But you want enough exposed to where you can glue the floor on in just a moment. So that's that, and that's ready to go. Now let's talk about fireplaces. Your fireplaces are going to need to be this dimension. That's 1.5 inches by 2 inches of the pink or blue, what they call the 1/2 inch foam. It's actually just slightly over, but it's basically the 1/2 inch foam. So this is going to be the exact same stuff that we used in the previous build when we built the exterior of the fireplace. Now the interior on most fireplaces jut in, so in a real house they would be like this, but at the top they would slope off toward the wall, and that's where the air would vent through up into the fireplace and where your flue would be. We're not going to be all that complicated about it. We're just going to represent where it is on the inside. So we need this to be about 2 inches tall, done exactly the same way. So I showed you the trick with the pencil where I bent the eraser piece to be able to cut bricks with it. So it's a little rectangle. I showed you that in the previous videos, and it comes out and it gives you the little bricks like this. Now for this, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these at that height, and we're going to cut the first 3 layers of brick off. I'm not sure exactly what the measurement is. I just found out that that's what looks good to me, is 3 layers of brick. And when I say we cut them off, I mean just like that. We're going to take them, line up a knife, put it in that notch. I don't know if you can see that one as well on camera, so I'll show you in the pink as well. And we'll just slice right through it like that and take that off. I'll show you again on the pink just to show you. And that's it. Okay, so that's the top part of the fireplace and the lower part of the fireplace. Now it starts to get a little tricky, so we're going to need a couple of measurements. Well, let me show you what we're doing with the bottom part first. On that, you're going to want to come 1 full brick in and cut that piece right along that line straight to the ground. You want to come on the other side and cut that piece straight to the ground. Now, you want to take those 2 little pieces you cut off and texture the bricks on the inside, just to match be the opposite of these. So this is a full-size brick here in the middle, and I'm going to put a full-size brick. This will be the edge of the brick. I'm going to put a full-size brick here. And then I'm going to continue that pattern. I don't know if you can see that, but that pattern is going to come out looking just like that pattern. Now, this middle piece that you take out, you want to take about 1/4 off the front. By front, I mean the one where you've already patterned. Oh, you don't need to pattern the backs of these, because those are not, they're essentially not going to be visible to your characters. They're going to be part of the wall. I never texture the back of them. So you want to take the little block you cut out of the middle and take about the front 1/4 of that off. This piece you can discard, recycle, use for other things later. This piece we're not going to need back. Now, let me get this patterned, and I'll show you what we're going to be doing with it. I don't know which one of these you're going to be able to see better, so I did it on both the blue one and the pink one. If you can see, what I did is I took that thin piece I split off, and I moved it back and attached it inside the fireplace. Just used a little hot glue for that. I did not texture the back, so you want to make sure that you keep the front of the side piece, the textured portion of the side piece to the front, and the textured portion of the back piece to the front. You don't want to end up with this smooth side in your fireplace. So keep it just like that. I'm going to go ahead and redo these on camera just to see which one you can see better. There's the textured front. Doesn't matter which way is the top or bottom, because with 3 bricks it's the same way around. So, tiny bead of glue right there. For the strings, and press it on there. Make sure the back is pressed down. Oops. Make sure the back is pressed down, back is pressed against. Good to go, and it makes a little U-shaped piece. Let me do this other one, so make sure you can see it. This one I'm going to put the glue on the middle rather than the side piece. It does not matter, that's why I'm showing you. You can do it on either side. So, tiny bead of glue. Now, as I said before, and 50 other times, I always use it on low temp. I never use it on high temp. So I've got the layer of glue on there, so it's not going to melt the foam. And I've got the textured piece to the front. And push those against there. Good to go. That's all it takes. Oops, kind of stuck that one down. That's all right. Little U-shaped piece. Now, the back does not need to be textured. Like I said, that's going to be the back of the fireplace, and it's going to end up looking like that, and it doesn't matter if it's got a texture or color on it at all. So those are ready to go. After that, I take them and I get ready to paint them. I do the stoops at the same time, but I'll talk about those in just a minute. When I paint them, there you can stick these down with blue tack. You can just hold them in your hand if you want, but it's a little messy. You can tape them down like I did with the Stoops here. I used a roll of tape rolled up with the sticky side out, so it turned it into double stick. If you've got double stick, you can use that. On most of these though, I pinned through the cardboard straight into the foam. It's not going to hurt anything. Just on stuff like this, watch your fingers, don't jab yourself. Okay, I paint the entire outside and inside in the base coat. In this case it's brown, just like it was for the exterior chimney. On the top portion of the riser for the chimney, I do the same thing. I paint the backs, front, make sure to get into all the nooks and crannies, get in all those good, because you want that darker color in there when you go to add the brick color. And that's it, let it dry. Once you're done with that, then go ahead and do like this. You do not have to paint the top or bottom of the bottom piece because it's getting glued to two things. You do not have to paint the bottom of the riser because it's getting glued to something. So I've done the color to match the exterior. Once this is in the house, this will be on the side that there's a wall there as far as the characters are concerned. So touch that up to look like the bricks, and that's it. That's ready to go. And now let's talk about stoops and mantles, because you want to do those at the same time. Now I got your set of measurements for those as well. Now these are the stoops and these are the mantles and hearth. The hearth is the portion at the bottom. That's this portion here at the bottom of the fireplace, and the mantle is the part that goes across the top. And the measurements for those are 3/4 of an inch by 1 3/4 inches for the hearth. Oh, I'm sorry, for the mantle, and 1 inch by 2 inch for the hearth. Now technically that's going to give you an 8-foot hearth going by the scale that I use, which is 1/48. That's 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. And that might be a little bit large, but remember, in medieval fireplaces they used to cook their meals in it. They would use it to keep warm. They would dry clothes by it. It was not unusual to have a huge fireplace. So 1 inch by 2 inch for the bottom, 3/4 and 1 3/4 for the mantle. For the front stoop, you want 3/4 of an inch out from the house by 2 inches wide. That's going to sit like this in front of the house. Now I managed to get that one a little off center. I don't know how I did that, but we'll work on that later. So it's going to sit like this. Now the back stoop is this one. This is 1 inch by 1 1/2. This one is 3/4 by 2, and this one is 1 inch by 1 1/2. Now when this house is sitting here, if you remember, this board on here sticks out a little, so we're going to have to cut a little notch just big enough for that board on this back corner of the stoop. I also round off the top edges of the stoops, and I texture the stoops with a ball of aluminum foil. So we're going to run through that really quick. I've got somewhere, oh, these are them. So I do not texture the mantle and hearth. I leave those alone. Figure people aren't walking on them. The rock's not going to be worn. Those are going to be inside. They're going to pick the nicest piece of rock they can find. So this will become a front stoop. I will take both layers of foam off, or paper off of it. Again, sanding stick, I want all those edges rounded off. Not top and bottom, just the top. So that will become the top outer portion of the front stoop. Don't even need to get that back edge. Just get the top sides as well. So it's now going to have a profile like that. It's angled off slightly there on the front, and there on the left side of the door. Left looking at the door, not left coming out the door. The back does not need to be sanded. The bottom edges don't need to be sanded. And then, just like every other texturing. Let me show you the comparison. This is the smooth foam. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't want to focus for me right now. But the smooth foam, and then no, we're just not going to focus today. Okay, but trust me, there's a stony texture on there. So just roll the ball across the rest of it. I typically also get the sides and front, the edges. There's no need to do the bottom, and there's no need to do this back edge. So that's it. That one's done. That's the front door. Now, on this, same thing. Peel the paper off. Sand 3 sides. 1 long, 2 short. You can get that one off. Same thing. Those are all tapered off. Well, supposed to be. Doing a bad job. There we go. Okay, now, when you're working on your house, you need to know if this is a door on the right side of the back or the left side of the back, because you need to make your notch accordingly. So for this, you just press that against there, and I know that that little notch needs to come out. So okay, so now both of your front and rear stoops are done. Get your little notch cut out. Both of those are going to get painted gray. And so I just taped them down here and painted that gray. That's just my regular base coat gray. Now this has a little bit of the white showing through. I think it gives it a nice texture. I may or may not be dry brushing these later, but for right now, I like that, and I'm going to leave it exactly like it is. You can, if you want, put a second coat over it just so it makes a solid uniform sort of gray. Now this has been textured with the stony texture, so if I was to dry brush it with the tan or something, you'd see all of that texture come out, and I may or may not do that. Keep in mind, I'm doing 20 of these houses. I want each to be different, so some will probably be like that and some won't. Now, the 2 hearth and mantle pieces. The hearth does not really need to be painted on the bottom, but I went ahead and taped it the same way as the mantle. I put a piece of double stuck tape, or in this case a piece of tape rolled up with the sticky side out, and stuck it on there like a fish fin or like a sail in the wind, and painted both sides with the gray. Now this is actually, the hearth is actually going to get a bit of more of a paint job later, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it. A lot of it's going to be hidden by the fireplace sitting on it anyway, and more than 90% of the mantle is going to be covered. So you can paint it with a second coat if you want to, or not. That's up to you. I am not going to. So let me get these off of here and get them organized, and I'll be right back to show you how I assemble them. Okay, I've got the hearth, the lower portion, the fireplace proper, the mantle, and what I've been calling the riser. I know which one's the bottom because I haven't painted it. And this is really simple. Take some glue. You do not want to put it on the hearth because you may miss where it's going. So you want to put it on whichever side you decide is the top or bottom, it doesn't matter, of the fireplace proper. Take a little bead of glue on the entire bottom. Okay, you want the back and the back to match up, and you want it to be centered. So you want to take that and press it against just like that. And with it laying on its back, that lines everything up right. Not upright, up correctly. And there you go. Now I will be touching this up with brown in a little bit, but that's the last thing I'm going to do to the fireplace. Okay, so we've got the top and bottom, or the middle and bottom. And we're going to take the 2 pieces of the top. Make sure you get it the right way around. You want the part that you painted over to sort of hide it and disguise it to be on top. And the part that you haven't painted at the bottom, you can hide by gluing it on here. Same deal, you want to put the glue on the piece of the fireplace and not on the mantle, so that you don't have any spread out where you don't want it. A couple little thin stripes of glue here. Again, I'm on low temp. You want the backs both flat on the ground and pressed together centered. Now there will still be a little bit of time for the glue to wiggle back and forth, as the foam keeps the heat of the glue in for a minute. So you've got a little bit of wiggle room, but only a few seconds. So again, that back is lined up. I'll be touching this up with brown in a little bit, and that's the top half. So now, bead around the bottom, across the back, across the top of the bottom. Same deal, center it, make them both flat on their back. And that is it. That is the completed fireplace, except for touching up the brown on the back. So, that's it. We are good to go. And that will be going into one of the houses. So give me just a moment. I'll come back and show you how to attach the stoops to the ground. So we've got our house sitting on the platform with the now dry paint. I've got it lined up with those lines I drew earlier. Okay, now if you remember from the very first video, or actually I believe it was the second video, where we attached the doors, we left a little space underneath them, which is for the stoop. That's exactly what it's for. Now, we're not going to want this pressed right up against it, because it's going to be a little bit difficult to wiggle the house into position each time. So we want to pull it out just the merest fraction of an inch out from that. So just a little bit back from that, pull that down. I like to take a pencil, put a mark along exactly the back of the stoop, and one showing exactly where to line up the edges. Now I'm drawing into the space where the house and the floor are going to be, so it's never going to be seen. So, a little bit of glue on the front stoop. Get rid of the stringer. You want to line it up between those two marks, just a little bit out from that one line where I drew that secondary pencil line. So I've got that lined up and glued down. Like I said, it's got a little bit of wiggle time because of the heat and it being held in by the foam. You should be good to go there. So I'll take that and use that as my front of the house. Now with that pressed against there and kept in place so that I know that it's centered, spin to the back, double check that we're still centered. Yes. I'm going to take this. Now remember, it's got this little notch cut out of it. So I want that notch to line up with that wall, and we do want this one same thing as the front, just out a mere fraction. Hold in place, move the house, mark where that edge is going to be, mark where the back is going to be. Dollop of glue. I got that a little too close to the edge. Let me pull that in with the gun a little. There we go. Line that up with the two marks I just made. Press in. It's still got wiggle, so let's go ahead and make sure that that's gonna be right where it needs to go with the house. Looks close enough. We're gonna call that perfect. It's probably not perfect, but it's perfect enough. And that's it. So the stoop and the two stoops, front and rear, are attached. Now, we are not doing where I'm going to show you how to make the floor, but first I'm going to be putting glue on this and adding flocking to it, just like I did in my big battleboard build. I've got and I should be remembering to put a link up here for you on that one. But if you've ever seen anybody flock anything to put grass on it, that's what I'm doing. I'm using my mixed colors of green again. I'm going to sprinkle those on. If I don't like how they look by themselves, I'll probably sprinkle a secondary color on there. I will be putting glue on here just inside the edge of the house. I mean, like a 1/16 of an inch just inside, so just a bit, but the rest will have flocking all over it. So I'm going to go ahead and flock this one, then I'll come back and show you how to make some floors while the flocking is drying. As you can see, I got that all flocked, ready to go, so I'm going to set that off to the side to dry. and we're going to work on the floor. Now for the floor, I've got measurement somewhere, but I don't remember where it is, so let me just go ahead and tell you. In order for this to fit inside the house, you are going to want this square to be somewhere between 3.5 inches and 3 5/8 inches. Anything smaller, and the house can be a little bit wiggly on that floor. That may be held in place by the front and rear stoop, or it may bend those up or knock them loose, so you want that close to the size. But if it's too big, the house won't fit on it. So you want this to be somewhere between 3.5 and 3 5/8 each direction. So once you've got that, the rest is really simple. You take those popsicles, the coffee stirrers that we were using on the other project, the ones that are already pre-stained. I don't know if you can see those, but we've already added a stain to those. Now, you do not want the boards to look the same all the way across. You do not want, this is fine, you want the boards to all look like this. But where they have seams on the ends, you don't want those to be matched up all the way across, so they end up looking like a brick pattern. Now, these sticks are wider than the square, but they are not exactly half as wide or exactly a double wide. So that means that if each time we take one and put it across here, and then nip it off with the clippers, and then attach it from I just always work from the left side, and I start from the bottom and move up. So this first one's going to go here. I'm going to clip it off, and this piece that's here is going to end up right here on the second one, and keep going all the way across. Let me show you a couple of those, and then I'll finish the rest off camera, but let me get a couple of these started. Again, low temp so you don't melt your foam. First bead all the way across. Very light. This stuff will squish out everywhere, so very light bead. It'll be plenty to hold it. Take the board, line it up with the corner, line it up with the bottom edge, press, done. Hold it for about that long. Then you take nippers, pair of scissors, pair of wire cutters, saw, X-Acto blade, anything you want to take, and nip that off even with that edge. Then you just take the piece you cut off, same thing, start over here. You want to know roughly how long that's going to be, so you don't want to glue all the way across. You just want to start with the glue just where this piece is going to be. So bead like that, get rid of the stringers, press it on, hold, done. Next one is going to go right here and continue. So little bead, get rid of the string, press it down, make sure it stays in place. Once the glue's got it held, and keep going. So I'll be right back once this one's done. Great, those have dried. I left them overnight, so this is a different day. We're going to jump through about 3 steps here real quick, and then we'll be done. So we're there. I've got both of these glued, flocked, dried, sealed, and dried, just like I did in my video on how I made my ground board, my map, my battle map. So let me show you exactly where we're at now with each of these. This one I've glued down. This is how your floor is going to be attached. This one I have not yet, so I can show you how that's going to work. You want to align this. There's 3 things to keep in mind when you're gluing this down. You want the edge of the floor to be lined up even, like centered, on the front stoop. You want this back corner, whichever way you're doing it, because your house could be reversed. You want this back corner lined up with the edge of this stoop. So center this one. I got these a little crooked, that's alright. Center this, line this, and the third thing you have to keep in mind, you got to have room for the wall, so you need this gap here. So we're going to put that right there. Nothing to it, just a little bit of glue. Get rid of the strings. Line up, center. By center, I mean leave these gaps. Line up, center, and press. That's it. The floor is attached. Your house plunks on there. Basically done. Now, fireplace needs to go on the same side as the chimney. Needs to line up right against that edge and centered in the room. Now, a lot of times people will have stuff where it's like glued down, things like that. It's possible I could end up using this for a different type of hovel with no fireplace, a warmer climate, a shack, witch's, you know, what they call a hag's hut, any of that. So instead of gluing it down, I use this blue tack, this poster stickum. Take a small piece off there. Small piece at each end. You want to kind of get that flat though, so there's not a big gap. Line it up and place, and you're done. That's it. Okay. Now the last thing we're going to do on this, well, we're painting the chimney in just a moment. That'll be the next section. So, I mean the fireplace. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Next thing we're doing is landscaping. So you put your house in there, figure out where that's going to go, and now you want to figure out where your landscaping is going. So for this, I'm just doing a few simple bushes. I'm using 2 different colors of lichen. I'm just going to place them in a few places. You can see just as I toss them down, it already makes the place look more lived in and homey, just having a couple of bushes. So I'm going to glue this down again with the hot glue. Just going to stick them in a few random spots on both of these 2 boards I've got completed, and I'll be right back to show you how to paint this chimney. On a fireplace, the ashes that sit on the bottom stain everything a light gray, and then at the top of the fireplace, inside, up near the top where the flames go up, that's where all the soot is. A lot of times people will paint it all black, or they'll paint the bottom black. The black is at the top. I don't actually have a solid black paint, so what I'm using is the closest I've got, which is called Licorice by Folkart. We're just going to call it black. The lightest gray I currently have is this medium gray by Folkart, and so I'm mixing it with some Apple Barrel Misty White. I'm trying for a very, very light gray. Now, we are only going to need a tiny amount, and it needs to be fairly watered down because we still want to be able to see the bricks and the stonework beneath it. So, take the brush, get it wet, get some of that water out. You know what, I'm going to use a different brush to mix that. A lot of white in that gray, get it really pale. Now I could, if I was making a larger batch, because you only want like a drop or 2, add some tan to this to make it truly look like ash, but I think this will be close enough. So, wet brush, a little bit of that gray, and you want to get everything inside here and just a semicircle on the hearth outside of it. So just the inside with this watery paint, almost like a wash, but we're going to want a little more than that. So, and everything inside there's going to get that coat. But you do want it to still be slightly translucent. You definitely want to be able to see the bricks. And don't forget to get the bottom where the fire itself would be. Now, I'm not building a fire in here. That's a project for another day. But we're just going to have some grate on there so you avoid brush where it's noticeable that you brushed it. You want to get that really wet, sort of mush it around, get a wet mix going on there. And that is it. We've got the gray down in there, including here on the hearth and inside the entire casement of the fireplace. Now, it doesn't really matter if you rinse out the brush or not. For this next part, you want to take just a tiny bit of the black, or in this case licorice, but your black color, and you want to get only the top inside. You want to get underneath where the fire would actually hit. Now normally there'd be a vent here, there'd be a hole that goes up the chimney, but I didn't mess with all that. So we're gonna put some black up there, and then just a little bit down the walls, but not all the way to the bottom. If you create some streaks in there where it's as if there were some cooler spots where the flame didn't take all of the black off, that's gonna look really good. I'll show you in just a second. I can't really show you on camera here in just a sec. Now we're doing this all wet on wet so that it sort of blends together. And if you can see that, I've got, where are we going? There you go. I've got the black on the top and the streaks running down, but I haven't gotten any at the bottom. So that's it. That's finished and done. Now, I've landscaped the yards, added a few bushes. Now these are just lichen you can get at any craft store. You can get them in the floral department at the craft section. The Walmart has them occasionally. Oops, got some glue strings on here. But they have them in the floral section at Michael's, Joann's, wherever you get your hobby supplies at. Now I just glued these down with hot glue. You can use any glue you want. Tacky glue, white glue, whatever glue works best for you. The only thing you have to remember is don't get them in the spot where the walls for the house are going to go. Okay, so realign the fireplace, stick it back down with the blue tack. Don't mess up my paint too much, which I just did. Nope, looks great. And that's it. Fireplace is done. Landscaping is done. Stonework is done. House is done. We're done. That's it. You're done. Okay, if you've enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. And follow us on social media. I will be back in just a minute with this little wrap up, but it's basically just going to show you these finished houses. So if you want to stick around for that, great. If not, that's okay. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming to Campaign Terrain. I hope you've learned a lot. I've come a long way since I started my first prototype. I've got these 2 houses finished. I got about another 6 in the works. As you know, I'm making many of these. And I hope that this has been an enjoyable and educational experience for you. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you next time on Campaign Terrain. I love you. Be safe. See you next time.